In today's video, we're doing something a little different. Instead of a full translation playthrough, we're taking a closer look at how the original Japanese text in The Legend of Zelda compares with the English version that most of us grew up with. If you've ever wondered whether the English script is a direct translation, or if things were changed, simplified, or even lost along the way, you're in the right place. Early games like The Legend of Zelda had pretty strict technical limits, which meant localization teams often had to make big decisions about what to keep, what to cut, and how to make it all fit. Legend of Zelda was a particularly ambitious game, so it was definitely pushing the system to the max. Today, we'll go line by line comparing the English and the Japanese text. I'll show the original Japanese with proper kanji and kana breakdown, and we'll do it word by word. Then we'll look at how it was adapted to English and what that tells us about the intent behind each version. Whether you're here for the language learning, the nostalgia, or just curious about how these classic games were localized, this should give you a whole new perspective on a game that you probably thought you already knew. Let's get into it. Let's start with one of the most iconic lines in gaming. In Japanese, the line is, Hitori de wa kikenja, kore o sezuki yo. A natural translation would be, going alone is dangerous, so I will grant you this. The English version, we all know, is, it's dangerous to go alone. Take this. Now, that's actually a pretty direct translation, but the context shifts in subtle ways that makes the English feel a bit more abrupt. In Japanese, this reads as a single continuous thought. The old man observes the danger and, in response, decides to bestow something valuable. The verb, sezukaru, to grant or bestow, carries a sense of intention and generosity, almost like he's entrusting you with something important. In English, that connection gets split into two sentences. It's dangerous to go alone becomes a sharp warning, and take this turns into a command. So instead of a calm decision to give, it feels more like urgency followed by instruction. A big reason for this is context, both linguistic and technical. Japanese can pack nuance into fewer characters, while early English localizations had to be shorter and more direct due to space limits. That often meant prioritizing clarity over tone. So even though its meaning is nearly identical, the feeling shifts from a wise, measured gesture to something quicker and a bit more forceful. All right, so here we have something different. In Japanese, the line is okanaga nawanaraba yaba tsukanai, which translates pretty directly to, if you don't have enough money, you can't use arrows. The English version gives us, Eastmost Peninsula is the secret. So what happened here? This isn't a case of rough translation, it's a completely different line. And that likely comes down to context and technical limitations during localization. In the original Japanese version, the hint is tied to gameplay mechanics, specifically the fact that arrows require rupees to use. It's practical and mechanical information. However, when the English localization happened, maybe it was decided that the hint could be better used by directing the player somewhere, so it actually gives us the location of a secret instead. So rather than a mistranslation, it's really an example of an adaptation, where the English version isn't just translating the text, but reshaping it to fit technical limits and design choices. So the shopkeeper is almost a perfect translation, even down to dropping the G from something. Buy something, will ya? It has that casual, down country kind of sound to it. A little bit of request, but not excessively polite, just super casual. Dodongo wa kemuri o kirao. So basically, this one's another one that's almost exactly the same. The only real difference is that dislike is a softer way of saying it. Kirao is much more hate or detest. So in the Japanese version, it's a little stronger, but otherwise, we get the same hint in both games. This is another pretty direct one-to-one translation, so I don't think there's much nuance to note here. Here's another one that's pretty much a one-for-one translation, almost exactly to the word. So on top of the waterfall, get the sword from the old man. Daki no ue, on top of the waterfall. In Japanese, the line is Terada wa hanasanayo. A natural translation would be, I can't talk for free, you know. The English version is, pay me and I'll talk. Again, pretty close in meaning, but the framing is different. In Japanese, this is phrased as a limitation. Tada de wa means for free, and hanasanai means can't speak. So the whole line feels a bit indirect, like the character is stating a condition. The yo at the end adds a casual, slightly matter-of-fact tone, not overly aggressive. In English, it flips to a more direct transaction. Pay me and I'll talk. That's clearer and punchier, but also a bit more forceful. Instead of, I can't do this unless, it becomes, do this and I will. So just like some of the other examples, the core idea stays the same, but the tone shifts from indirect and conversational to more direct and transactional, likely to keep things concise and immediately understandable for the player. In Japanese, the line is, Mayoi mori o kita nishi minami nishie. A direct translation would be, in the maze forest, go north, west, south, west. And the English version is, go northwest, southwest in the forest of maze. So again, pretty close, but there's a couple subtle context differences. First, Mayoi mori literally means lost forest or maze forest. The Japanese puts the location up front, setting the context first. In the maze forest, then gives directions. The English flips that around. It leads with directions, then adds the location at the end. It's a small structural change, but it makes the line feel more like a set of quick instructions rather than a contextualized hint. There's also the phrase forest of maze, which sounds a bit unnatural in English. That likely comes from trying to stay compact while still conveying maze-like forest. A more natural phrasing would have been maze forest or lost woods, but space and character limits were always a factor, and not everybody who was doing the localization was totally fluent in English. So this isn't a case of meaning being lost, it's more about word order and phrasing. The Japanese presents it as, here's the place, now follow the steps, while the English compresses it to a single, slightly awkward instruction. So the most natural translation for this line would be, it's a secret from everyone, you know. The English version is, it's a secret to everyone. So again, the meaning is close, but the nuance shifts a bit. First, naisho means secret, but has a slightly lighter, more conversational feel, like, keep this between us. It's not a heavy or dramatic type of secret. Then there's minani, meaning from everyone or to everyone, depending on how you frame it. In Japanese, the nuance means more like, don't let anyone else know. And finally, the yo at the end adds a casual, almost friendly emphasis, like the speaker is letting you in on something. So the Japanese line feels a bit more like, hey, this is just between us, okay? The English, it's a secret to everyone, keeps the idea but sounds a little stiffer and maybe a little bit odder of a phrase. A more natural English version might have been, keep this a secret from everyone. So just like some of the other lines, nothing major is lost, but the tone shifts from something a little more personal and conversational to something slightly more formal and maybe less natural. This one's very close, just a slight nuance difference. Haira is a direct command, enter, which feels more decisive. Walk into softens it slightly, making it feel more like guidance than an instruction. But overall, it's a clean, straightforward translation. Same idea, just tiny shift in tone. Here's another one with the same core idea with a slightly different nuance. Sukina ho is the one you prefer, and Suzuki-yo, grant, bestow, carries the same slightly formal giving tone we saw earlier. The English flips it again into a more direct situation. Take, which feels less ceremonial and more casual. So just like before, same meaning, but the Japanese feels like a deliberate offering, while the English feels more like a simple choice. The nuance here is tegoran, which softens the command. It feels encouraging, like, try doing this, or go ahead and show her, rather than a strict command. Same meaning in the English version, but it drops that gentle guiding tone and comes off a bit more direct. So again, nothing lost in the meaning, just a little bit more of a tone change. This one has a more significant nuance shift. In Japanese, kore wa nyuchimon desu. That's roughly, this is something of value. The key here is nyuchimon, which means a valuable item or worthwhile thing. And desu is kansei dialect, giving it a friendly, slightly sales pitch tone, like a shopkeeper hyping up their goods. The English version, boy, this is really expensive. That's a pretty big shift. Instead of emphasizing value, the English focuses on price, making it sound like the item costs a lot rather than being worth a lot. So the context changes this from, this is a great item, to, this is pricey, which subtly alters how the player might interpret the purchase. It's a good example of how even when the tone of a pushy shopkeeper is preserved, the actual message can drift in localization. So the Japanese on this one, tsukai konaseru nara kore o Suzuki-yo, roughly means, if you can master using it, I will grant you this. The structure is really clear in Japanese. It's a conditional. If you are able to use this properly, then I'll give it to you. And again, Suzukio, grant bestow, has a slightly formal intentional tone. The English version, master using it and you can have this. The issue is that master using it sounds a bit awkward in English. It's trying to capture the tsukai koseru to skillfully master, but ends up feeling clunky and slightly unclear, almost like it's missing some context. Also, the Japanese flow is a conditional leading to a reward, while the English reads more like a blunt instruction followed by a promise. So, even as a kid, I really found this one confusing. I couldn't really parse it very well for some reason. So, I get it now, but without the if and without the can, it's just really clunky. So, this one wasn't the best translation, in my opinion. So here's another one that's pretty similar in both languages. A little bit opposite of the smoke one we just had, though, where in this case, kirai is more of a dislike versus the hate that we're reporting here. And then obviously the English is a little more direct than the Japanese version, but essentially the same meaning. So this guy's offering to sell us more bombs. And again, this one's pretty similar in both languages. What's kind of interesting is the I bet you would like to have some more bombs really goes well with the jaro ending in the Japanese. So the jaro ending is kind of like a probably, which really is used in a very similar way to that. Like, I bet you'd like this. No adventure is complete without a warp zone. Take any road you want. The Japanese version is pretty similar. Go down the road you like. A little more commanding, but no real differences here. This one's got a slight subtle difference in the English. Buy medicine before you go, so it's a little bit of a friendly, hey, don't leave without the medicine. Well, as in the Japanese version, it's buy medicine, then go. So a little bit more abrupt. She doesn't really want you to linger after you do your shopping. So here we have aim at the eyes of Goma, or Goma's eyes aim at. So I can't think of much to say about this one in any significant difference. So here's one that actually does have a bit more of a substantive difference. So when you're playing in the English version, this clue is substantially more cryptic than it would have been in Japanese, because in Japanese, it at least gives you the added clue of it's a fountain. So if you're observant, you'll notice there's a couple fountains. One of them has a fairy, one of them doesn't. In this English version, we don't get that. We're just told somewhere fairies don't live, which is pretty much everywhere except for that one location without that subtle clue. So I guess that's one where we just had to work a little harder. So here's another complete switcheroo on the hints. Our English version just gives us a secret within this very dungeon. The original Japanese version gave us our first little hint about where we could find Death, or Death Mountain, which is obviously an important place to get to eventually. This one's pretty notoriously cryptic in both versions. However, the Japanese might have a little bit of an edge because they're a bit more advanced than we are in the onomatopoeia categories. So the butsu butsu is a pretty unmistakable sound of a growling stomach, whereas in English, we don't have anything quite that immediately recognizable. So grumble grumble is certainly passable for that, but without any other clues, it doesn't give us a ton to go on. But he's either grumpy or whatever he is, but it turns out he's just hungry. So give him some food and we'll pass on. Here's another clue that's pretty different. In the English version, we get 10th enemy has the bomb, which I believe means that every 10th enemy is going to drop a bomb. I'm not totally sure. And then search for the lion key. Lion key, obviously a pretty handy item since you don't need to keep finding keys. You can open any locked door automatically with that. So I'd say that's a good one that's worthwhile having, but already think I'm going to get that. Although I don't hear because the key count still says not A. This helpful fellow seems to be saying the same thing in both versions. Just go to the next room. So I guess he's giving me a little hint that there's somewhere I can go other than where I just came. And then here at the very end, they've kept Zelda very consistent in how she greets Link. We hold up the Triforce with victory. Finally, peace returns. Or thus, peace was returned. And here ends the story. So, very, very nice. Nothing more to do. We just have our little ending credits. Much shorter back in the day. Oh, and now another journey begins. Please press the start button. And that's that. So that's the side-by-side comparison of The Legend of Zelda in NES English and Famicom Japanese. Remember to like and subscribe if you want to see more content like this, and I hope you enjoyed.